Ed Flemke was a great guy, great guy. We would talk about cars and building chassis and things. And he didn't race at Waterford that often, but he would come up every once in a while. And when he came up, it was great to see him. He was a competition, but he was a hell of a nice person. I say one of my favorite drivers.
Yeah.
Eddie Flemke, I would say he was one of the smartest car builders and setup guys ever was, you know. Probably the smartest, you know, and he was such a great guy to talk to, you know, and he was down to earth.
Oh, Eddie was been a friend of mine since I was a kid. Like many of us, he took us under his wings, and that year I won the championship, he would sit and talk to me, and I was nobody, just a young kid, and he just was such a smart man. He knew so much about racing, and he taught you so much if you would listen.
Tremendous amount of respect for Eddie Flemke, probably one of the greatest ever to get into a race car of any kind.
I had utmost respect for Ed as a car builder, driver, as a person, and he helped a lot of people.
He was one heck of a race car driver, and I can remember, and I'll tell you one story at Stafford that always stuck out in my mind about Eddie. I come up through the traffic and he's leading the race, so the minute I get to him, I jump to the outside. And he hangs me out there for like 20 laps. So I wear myself out, plus wear my car out, and never get by him. So he just chugs away, and Freddie DeSaro gets by me, and I pull in and I'm third, you know, and I'm sitting in the car after the race, and you know, I drove my heart out trying to beat him. He comes walking over, not a drop of sweat on him, you know, and he said, listen. He says, when you got up on the side of me, he says, I was just taking it easy. He said, I just let you stay out there. He says, you should have thought of a way to pass me before you just jumped up there. Never forgot that. He didn't even know me. All he knew was I was a little kid, a young kid, and Eddie was always willing to help people. And a great guy. And of course, I married his daughter, so, you know, in the beginning that wasn't always, I don't think he was real happy with me at that point, but over time, you know, we talk about it and we laugh about it. He is actually, over time, when I went to Winston Cup Racing, became one of my best race fans.
He never did retire. He said he would never retire, and he didn't from racing. I think he stopped racing, I think when he was 50, 49 or 50. And he didn't take it well because he was being left behind. He felt unwanted or unneeded anymore.
Then when he wasn't going to drive, I thought that was, you know what, I don't have to sit here and who else is better than Eddie Flemke to tell you what was going on?
That was the greatest thing that ever happened to Waterford, as far as I'm concerned. Eddie Flemke is a guy who has been in just about every conceivable situation that could happen on a racetrack.
If you were a driver and you had an issue, or you had a question, or you had a tech issue, and you went to Flemke, you knew you better cut right through the chase, because he knew exactly what you were talking about.
You couldn't bluff this guy, and you couldn't snow. He knew what he was talking about. Very, very smart guy.
If he saw a guy that was maybe causing problems just by being, you know, too aggressive for his own good, Eddie would walk over and kind of counsel the guy, you know, and say, man, if you just back off 5%, you'd be better. You know, you'd be getting around better. You'd be a better racer. These guys wouldn't all want to kill you every week. And we will have less cautions as a result.
He could call a wreck a lap before it was going to happen. I mean, that's how smart this guy was.
Flemke added a new dimension to that job. Eddie had an insight that I don't think the Speedbowl had ever had before.
You know, let's say Mickey Mantle had become an umpire, you know, it'd be the same type of thing. Every ball player would want to, you know, I don't want to screw up in front of Mickey. People respected him so much that the number of cautions in a typical Waterford program shrunk dramatically when Eddie was there, because Eddie would occasionally pipe up at the drivers' meeting.
Well, Eddie was basically a soft-spoken type of person, you know, and he'd bring up little incidents from the previous week, you know, and say, you know, we don't need to see this happen again. You need to control yourself.
He was very firm, you know, and that's the kind of, you know, race director you need, somebody who really knows what's going on out on the track.
He's always been a mentor. He's always tried to help the little guy. but the way he did it, he was more hands-on.
He was willing to give competitors pointers on how to maybe make their cars better.
Just something where he could help you get your car going a little bit better. He didn't mind offering a little advice.
If he seen you were in a slump, and he'd come over and offer his assistance.
Instead of just walking over and telling you what to do, he'd say, "Hey Bob, go over and get in so-and-so's car and take it out and see what's wrong with that car." Or he'd go over and he'd say to me, "Hey, come on, let's go over, let's help him out.
You ought to try this, you ought to do this, you ought to change this spring or something." Always going around and helping somebody to get better. And that's what I loved about Eddie Flemke.
When you walk in the pits at Waterford, from the parking lot through the pit gate, that official stand was right there in turn 4. And if Eddie saw you, he would say, "Come on up." And I loved watching from that vantage point. Number one, I had a ton of respect for Eddie anyway. He was just such a legend, in the area. And he was from Southington and had been really, really good to me when I was a 15-year-old kid trying to be a writer. So now I was a little bit older, and it was just fun to spend a little time with him on those Saturday nights. But what it also taught me was, you think you've watched enough races and you've sat, and sat in judgment on things and written about people. Eddie saw things that I never saw, and he'd be elbowing you. Did you see that? I don't know what you're talking about, Eddie.
I'm standing up on the stand with Eddie when watching the race. Something happened. He said to me, "Promoter," he said, "what did you see?" And I told him, and he says, "I didn't see that." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "How do you know he didn't give him a brake job? How do you know this?" He brought up a number of points. And I said, "I don't." And we talked, and then I looked at him and I said, "Well, Eddie, I'll see you. That's your problem. You figure it out." And he said, "You son of a gun."
And it really, I think it was slowly killing him not to race. And I do believe, I don't, my father didn't die of a heart attack. I really, I think he more died of a broken heart, not a heart attack. Because I think life was passing him by. And he didn't know how to stop that. Because he was so competitive and he was always him. It was hard to be something different. And I think the position at Waterford helped him get back to the hunger of being competitive. He had a worth, he had something to be proud of, and he was contributing again.